Hi everybody, can you hear me? Hi, my name is Matt Ward. I'm the editor of the Chronicle Progress here in Delta. Welcome to our candidates forum. It's nice that we have a crowd here. I was a little worried. We're going to start out tonight with the initiative, Proposition 6. We have folks from basically representing both sides of the proposition, which seeks to prohibit industrial hog farming in Millard County, passed by voters. So we're going to hear from them in a second, and then after we hear from each side, we have our moderator, Chad Booth, from the county seat and At Your Leisure. Great programs. If you haven't checked them out, you should. He's going to moderate tonight's discussion. He'll ask some prepared questions at some point, and then we'll allow the audience to ask some questions. So just when we get to that point, we're going to have to keep it kind of brief tonight. We'll run around with a microphone and let a few of you ask some questions if you have any. And then we'll get to our candidates tonight, Bill Wright and Ed Phillips. And we'll wrap up the program after we hear from them, ask them some questions, allow the audience to ask some questions, and that'll be it. Okay?
Other than one thing.
What?
We're going to pledge allegiance to the flag, and we'll use that flag right there.
Okay, that sounds great. Everybody stand up. We'll pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for taking the time to be engaged as citizens in your community for this debate, and appreciate it. If you're nervous because my mask is off, you are 6 feet away, but if you want to make it 10, go ahead. When we get to the questions from the audience, as I often tell people on the county seat and sometimes the At Your Leisure social media page, please be civil. I know that particularly in the proposition, there's some heated feelings. There are always angry ways to say things, and there are always civilized ways to say things. And we want to put the best foot forward for Millard County and make sure that your questions to the panelists as well as to the candidates remain civil and professional. And I'm sure that you will do that. To the candidates, wherever they are, I ask that you do the same thing in your responses to the audience and to each other, so that we can walk away with the record of this being productive and informative. So I will start. We started with a coin toss. The coin toss was won by well, first off, I would like the teams to introduce themselves by name. So we'll start. Will the no's please stand up and introduce yourselves briefly?
I'm Erin Sorensen, and I live here in Delta. And my husband and I have a small sheep operation here in town.
I'm Jason Christensen. My wife and I live in Holden, and we are the owners and managers of A&J Swine LLC, the South Farm west of Phillips.
Okay. Will the yes team please stand up and introduce yourselves?
I'm Holly Remkus, and I am an administrator for It's Our Future. We're ones who are putting together the Proposition 6 for people to vote on.
My name is David Remkus. I'm a building contractor, and I live west of Fillmore.
My name's Steve Maxfield. I moved here in 1995, wanted to have enough money to lose to all farming and ranching. Never had enough, made a good start, so we're hobby farmers, and I'm glad to be here.
Okay, very good. We have collected questions from the editorial staff of the newspaper, and we've also collected questions. Some of them have been questions that have been emailed in. And so we will start with the questions. We will alternate sides. The noes chose to go second. So the first question will be addressed to yes for Proposition 6. What's that? Oh, opening statements. I'm sorry. 5 minutes of opening statements. Your turn first.
Absolutely. First of all, Chad, I want to thank you in the Pledge of Allegiance, because agriculture has a deep and rich history in America, and it's very true that united we stand and divided we fall. And unfortunately, the issue we're talking about today has been very divisive, and I hope that we can get away from that a little bit and just stay with the facts. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but they're not entitled to their own set of facts. So to give you a little bit of history going back to where this really can be traced back to, back in 1610, there was a case that was decided. It was called the Allred case, and it was competing property rights of adjoining neighbors. And believe it or not, it had to do with pigs. Somebody built pigs right next to this guy's house and built a building that he couldn't see the light and basically polluted his air. In fact, what he said is, William Allred claimed that Thomas Benton erected and used a pigsty too close to his house, so that the stench made his own house unbearable to live in, stopping the wholesome air. The court ruled that the smell of the sty was enough to deprive Allred of his property rights and personal dignity, and therefore a violation of his rights and honor was stripped away from him. So our property rights, or competing property rights, goes back to common law and common sense all the way to 1610. We've had a lot of property rights decisions since then, but one of the most important is in 1997, Millard County crafted a general plan. That general plan was put together by all of us. What do we want to see Millard County in the future? As we can clearly see here the beautiful past and the history that we want to preserve. Members at that time, we had Circle 4 farms down in Beaver. And they were experiencing some complaints and smells and some environmental contamination. And it was specifically discussed whether or not we wanted swine CAFOs in Millard County at that time. Is that something we want to pursue? And from the people that I talked to, it was no. We want to go after horses, cattle, sheep, and those things and preserve the heritage of Millard County. The general plan states, if I can just quote from it really quick, Millard County encourages orderly residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, and recreational growth and development, and will continue to identify areas within the county appropriate for these uses. Development will be allowed to continue in a responsible manner and in locations that contribute to the economic and social well-being of the county residents. So the general plan is very specific that some of these divisive things, maybe nuclear plants or some of these other things, might be out of bounds. It has been said out there, and I guess we've got 2 minutes left, that this is being pushed by radical outside groups. Nothing could be further from the truth. We did scoping with potential over 200 sponsors. It only required 5. We had multiple meetings, and what we discovered in those meetings is this is not a new problem. Smithfield has been operating CAFOs in the United States for 30 years, and these are not family farms. In fact, even looking at Wikipedia, in 40 years we lost 92% of the family farms. We had the same amount of pigs, 57 million being raised, but instead of 1 million farmers, we only had 800,000 farms producing those pigs. So if we look at CAFOs, CAFOs have been the #1 contributor to the loss of family farms in America. As we move forward, and I guess we have about 2 minutes left, there's a lot of good arguments that we can make for or against. But the fact of the matter is this initiative is 1 page long. 1 page long. And it prohibits swine CAFOs. The reason for that is, unlike the Allred, is Smithfield Farms, using contract farmers, built around in Iowa a bunch of residents that have been there for up to 100 years. And the stench and the flies and the pestilence were so bad that they couldn't move because nobody would buy their property. The grandkids wouldn't come to visit. And after multiple years, they finally got to court to award them $400 and some odd million. Well, did Smithfield at that point say, look, we're just going to pay up, we're sorry, we're going to be good neighbors? No. They went to the legislature, they changed the laws that say you as citizens have no right to sue, like in the Allred case, for a balancing of the property rights. That there's nothing you can do if they move in and create a smell which also creates hazards such as pathogens, ammonias, things that are not always harmful to pigs because these are housed in warehouses where there's fans. And that fan blows that air out because it's dangerous for the pigs, and that air is in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your opening statement. And now we will turn the time over to the notes.
So, my husband and I were both raised on family farms, by the definition. We worked with our grandparents and our parents, and when we moved here to Millard County, the one thing that I remember seeing when we moved here was we would go for a ride. And I was in awe at the magnitude of agriculture here. It was a beautiful thing, something that I didn't get to see where I grew up, even though I grew up in a farming community. The hills and the rolling alfalfa fields and the scope and the size of the dairies is so impressive, and I think we take that for granted. And there are some things that we learned on the farm, like hard work and dedication, and that was the best way we knew how to raise our kids. And when you raise your kids, you hope you're turning them into the best human beings that they possibly can be. And then you hear sayings like, rural Utah's greatest export is our children. And the reason that's the case is we raise these great, hard-working people that we hope to come home, but we don't lay the groundwork for continued growth for industry in our own communities. I want my children to be able to come home to my family farm, but in order for them to do that, we have to keep growing, expanding, and changing. And all that I ask for is that we vote no for this referendum so that we can keep having those conversations. This referendum is asking for an all-out ban on an industry. And I want us to think what that really means. I totally agree. There is a place. There are regulations. There are safety protocols that we should demand be met. But the reality of the situation is there are already 7 of these farms operating in Millard County, and we've never had a complaint. Never had an economic citation, or an environmental one, excuse me. Not one. These families are doing it right. And he says these aren't family farms. I can hold up a picture of Jason's family, but he's here today. These are family farms. I know many, many people who produce farming products here in Millard County and outside of it. It's the Coombses, it's the Webbs, it's the Christensens. And we talk about industrial farming because it takes that personality out of it. It takes it away. It's easy for me to say, no, there's risks. Instead of, you know what, you've been doing a good job. You've been doing it the right way. Here in Millard County, I trust our farmers and ranchers over any in the nation. To survive in Utah's agricultural market, you have to be inventive, ingenuitive, and hardworking. He talked about preserving our heritage. I've heard it say that Millard County is a county of outsiders. What a wonderful thing. Part of our tradition is that we have gone out and we have asked different industries to come into the area. Whether you agree with or disagree with the power plant, think of the blessing it has been to our economy and to the families here. We brought in dairies so that we would have a market for our hay. Our tradition is to build industry. And before COVID hit, Millard County was one of 2 counties with a negative economic growth because we stopped doing that. As a mom of 4 small children, seeing empty grocery store shelves in March was one of the scariest things I have ever seen. We have no business exporting the production of food. I trust our farmers and ranchers far more than anyone else to do it the right way. And a vote no for this referendum is a vote to continue the conversation about how do we do this and how do we do it the right way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So continuing with our alternating back and forth, I will continue by asking questions. from the prepared combination of editorial questions and reader questions that have come in so far. So for the yeses, before voters signed on to put Proposition 6 on the ballot, county commissioners crafted stricter CAFO rules that some, like the Farm Bureau, characterized as an effective ban on hog CAFOs. Why do you think that these rule changes don't go far enough to rein in industrial hog farms? Mm-hmm.
I guess you're posing the question to me. Quick question to me. That ordinance was crafted and it had a 10-mile setback. And that 10-mile setback, Steel Western came in and applied for 2,000 acres to go ahead and go into agricultural industrial, put 38,400 on the South Farm. And basically there is no density regulations whatsoever after that 10-mile buffer. On top of it, Smithfield sued Beaver County for their 5-mile buffer and told us they go around the state and get less than a 2-mile buffer. But the real issue goes back to that Allred case. And the applicant in that said, yes, state law says odor is not a nuisance. And not being a nuisance, I can move in on your property line and there's nothing that you can do about it. So based upon what we call the right to farm laws, which have become the right to harm, which has transferred all the property rights of individuals over to these corporate farmers or factory farms, we've lost the ability at a local level to even regulate. In fact, I asked the county attorney that question. I've got a copy of the codes. You've got 44-4 202, you got 23-28-303, that basically says a county shall exclude the activities described in subsection 1B from the definition of public nuisance in county law or ordinance regulating the public nuisance. Any activity conducted in the normal course of an agricultural operation or an odor. So basically, we are flat-handed. We had no choice. It's either an all or nothing. And just one thing is an all or nothing in that case. What we're banning is CAFOs as defined by federal law. And federal law breaks that down to a large CAFOs, 2,500 pigs or 10,000 below. So there are still some of those industries that can continue, even if the proposition passes.
Thank you very much. Question for you. Much has been said that certain hog producers have eyed Millard County as a place to expand large-scale operations in Utah, perhaps producing millions and millions of hogs here. Can this county reasonably sustain that type of production and still protect people's property rights and the area's natural resources? Is there a limit when it comes to siting these farms, or siting these farms?
So I think I might hand the mic over to Jason in just a moment. But when you talk about is there a limit, I think there's always responsible stewardship and limits. I don't think that the conversation is let's open this wide up for any industry. I love Millard County. I want to protect it too. The conversation has never been no regulation. The conversation has been let's keep finding the safe location. Let's keep finding out what these families are doing that are causing there to be no complaints, and let's build upon that. I actually spoke to the actual companies that contract these growers, and there are no intentions for bringing in millions of hogs. I don't know where that came from, and I can't answer for that. But I would just say that we want to continue talking about how to do this the right way. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Just to add to that slightly, I don't believe that the conversation has ever been, let's turn everything loose. Just like Aaron said, where nobody wants to turn everything loose and turn this into something that nobody wants to put a hog farm directly in somebody's backyard. What we're talking about is property rights and having that conversation when somebody comes up with a piece of property or a location that they believe works. Let's open it up and have that discussion. Given that specific instance, let's not just throw this blanket no out so where we can't have the discussion and we're limiting growth for our county.
Okay, thank you very much. Question for you. There have been reports of multiple efforts at the state legislature aimed at going around counties to site industrial operations from the state level. This has even been discussed in the county seat world. How concerned are you about those efforts, and do you feel that they could, in fact, nullify Proposition 6 intended purpose, even if it is passed?
You know, that is a great question. As the legislature seems to be really disconnected from the rural issues, and that has been a major problem. What we've been told here in Millard County is we're such a small county, the last census was 12,500 people, that it doesn't matter. We're willing to be sacrificed, basically, for the policies of the corporate farms. However, the Constitution is the supreme law of the state of Utah. In Article 6, Section 1, divests the legislative power in the legislature and the people of the state of Utah. And the people have the right to basically do a referendum on any local law or submit an initiative on any local law. So I am concerned about it, but I believe the Constitution protects us because planning and zoning is a local issue. It's an issue best handled with neighbors and at the local level. And I believe that at the end of the day, that's where the best legislation starts, is with the people.
Side note, that sounds like the two of you are saying the same thing right here. So would you care to just take a couple of minutes and respond to that same question?
Yes, and I agree with what he just said. I think that local control usually has the best interest and the most informed people making the decision, which is why I would encourage us to continue allowing these propositions for this type of farming to go before our local governing bodies, rather than placing a referendum limiting that discussion. I'm in agreement. I think that we should allow for that control to stay here, and I think a vote no for the referendum actually reinforces that point.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question. And
just as a point of courtesy, can I just follow up just a little bit on the first question?
Take 30 seconds to respond to that.
I think the very important thing that you brought up, and I'm glad Jason's here, is what do we have as local control? The nexus of this was the application for the Christensen originally finisher barn. And it was approved as a finisher barn, low impact, 1 lagoon, 3 million gallons, 3 employees, going to be very low impact. It was approved and passed even though our planning commission had not given an up or down vote, and the people didn't get to have a say in it. They were very upset. Since then, the farm has changed uses substantially. They've gone into a sow barn. In a sow barn, they now have 42 million gallons of waste. They've gone from 1 million pounds of live weight pigs to 2.5 million pounds of pigs. They've gone from 5,800 gallons of effluent discharge to almost 50, 60,000 gallons, all without ever a public hearing or with the commission or any public input. In fact, when I talked to Jason last year on the specific issue, why are these lagoons 42 million gallons instead of 3 million gallons? What's the difference? And he talked about the economic impact, but this is a quote that he said. He says, the reason for this giant lagoon, this farm would produce more manure than you can discharge as fertilizer in Millard County. So what we have found by experience is through his own application is what they apply for at the end of the day doesn't have to be what they built. And that we as the residents are stuck with that. In fact, in their application of the DEQ, they said that the new discharge application would discharge more ammonia because weekly they were going to pull off the lagoons, flush it through the system, and that would be discharged as a health.
Your 30-second answer turned into 1 minute and 45. So let me return this back to you to respond to that 30 seconds, please, and then we'll move on to the next question.
It's your plan. I mean, if you don't, you cannot. Okay. All right, I guess we want our next question.
Okay, we will move on to the next question. And this question is for you. Almost everyone agrees that hog waste is a major issue when it comes to siting industrial farm operations. How does the industry police itself, very relevant to what you just said, so that its neighbors can be reasonably assured that their communities and natural resources aren't harmed by the industry's practices, particularly waste remediation? So how do you tackle that big?
So as we talk about our lagoon, the typical standard for a municipal city sewer lagoon is a 40 mil liner. I'm not sure on Delta's, but I know Fillmore doesn't have a plastic liner at all. Theirs is a bentonite lined sewer pump. Our lagoon is a 60 mil thick welded HDPE liner. We have a leak detection system underneath the lagoon that we monitor every week. It's basically a French drain system that will show us any leaks that come out of that. Our lagoon is designed as it's called an anaerobic digester. And so the solids stay underneath a cap of water in the lagoon. That material digests. We don't have to discharge from that lagoon for 20 years. What comes out as an end product, they call it desludging, is really basically carbon. It turns to a black film. And so we're not discharging manure or effluent into the ground. We're containing it and acting, I guess I've lost my train of thought, but that's how we're controlling our waste system.
All right. So in response to that question while you're on it, just if I may, what do you do with the carbon at that point? He's talking about creating more manure than the county can absorb in its own fertilizer. Does this become an export product? Does it have a commercial value in your opinion?
It is used currently on a lot of hog farms. It's used as a soil conditioner. Like I say, it's very high in carbon. It's used as a soil conditioner. It doesn't have a lot of nutrient properties at that point. Alfalfa loves it because of its carbon content. But yeah, it is a waste product. But then again, you look at the fact that we're taking 20 years of waste and compacting it down into that small amount, and then it's used and sold on current farms as a soil conditioner.
30-second response from you. Do any of these current operations currently bring or create health hazards to the water, the current water? Are there any known cases of hazards to local water?
Absolutely, yes.
Can you speak a little louder? Apparently,
Okay.
people in the back can't hear. So
I've never heard that I didn't talk loud enough, but the answer is definitively yes. In 2001, the Southwest Board of Health did a study down in Milford, which shares the same aquifer. And they found the negative health effects in workers, increased respiratory, diarrhea in the general population. They also found contaminated wells into the Great Basin because we sit on an aquifer. And it had, the coliform, the stuff, from the pig feces in it. And they couldn't figure out how it got there. Well, in 1996, one of the first spills that happened, there was a backflow into the lagoon, from the lagoon into a well in Milford. And at least 80,000 gallons went down that well. They didn't report it for over 4 months. They were fined $6,000. They claimed by pumping it and simply putting bleach down would solve the problem. But as we sit on the Great Basin, what we've noticed is the water is so old, we're missing an isotope. We're over pumping it right now. Anything that leaks down, and as you talked about the tile drain is required because it's out in Flowell, it's on that volcanic rock, and the water goes immediately down. It's there for life. There's no way to get it out.
okay, yeah,
Can I say something to that?
very quick response. Yeah.
The studies that he's referring have nothing to do, though, with our current Millard County hog production, and there have been 0 environmental citations and no complaints for odor or nuisance against any of our Millard County farmers, and I think that's really important.
Okay, we
need to take some
our time is, how far into this are we? 'Cause
we're about 15 minutes into this, so we have about 5-7 minutes for audience questions.
Okay, so we're gonna break from here and start taking some audience questions.
Why don't we get one for each group if we can? Does anybody have a question, first of all? Which group do you have a question for?
Just personal. I just spent a week down in Milford. I hunt down there every year, and I had to move 5 miles to the west to get out of the stench. anything of that
You need a
magnitude,
microphone.
we don't
Yeah.
need.
Well, I was just in Milford for over a week, and I've hunted down there for several years, 10 or 15, and I had to move 5 miles further to the west because of the stench down there. Had some light breezes, there was no big winds down there when I made the decision to move. If anything like that's coming to Millard County, I suggest that we do this.
Okay,
deal.
we really want this to be a question addressed to the two
Okay.
sides, not an
What
editorial comment.
are you saying that there is not going to be 3 million pigs brought here, and yet you want to keep building more pig farms? Is it going to be like Smithfield down there? Because my truck has a filter in it, and it stunk driving through there.
So your question, I just want to clarify, is there an intention to bring in 3 million hogs, and are they going to keep building, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I believe, I have asked that question, the intention is not to bring in 3 million hogs. There are less than 1 million hogs in Utah currently, from my understanding. So, do we want to keep building? That's a good question. That's a conversation to have. Where we put them matters. Density matters. How they manage their odor and their water quality and their air quality will matter. I don't disagree with you on any of those points, and I think that's a conversation we keep having. Technology in agriculture gets better all the time. It changes all the time. And I think that's really important for us to remember we're doing things better every day.
Okay, thank you very much. A question for the yes people. Does anyone have a question for them? Does anyone have another question?
Okay, I'm hearing about like the smell, the waste, but I think probably as important or probably more important is the water.
We are in an extreme drought. And Mr. Christensen has said we don't want to use, we don't want to have waste, but it is an absolute fact that the pig farm that is there now is not the one that was permitted. The water is up, and that question was not answered about the water. They were allowed, they were permitted to have and use so much water. That has what, gone up 700 or 800%? Our aquifers are being drained. The reality is, and I have no problem with agriculture, we have a farm ourselves. The reality is we live in a desert, and we have been in a drought. And I don't know if we can handle water. Yes, I'm addressing to both. Our water is a huge issue here. Tell me, both sides, how are you going to monitor it? How are you going to protect it? And can we bring in these huge industries without pushing the small, established farmers that have been here out?
Just take an opportunity to answer that. She asked the question to both sides. Let's give this a 1 minute answer on both sides. Mr. Timer, if you can take care of that. We'll start with the notes.
So the discussion about water usage, water rights is wholly separate from our conditional use permit. You talk about our permit allowing so much water. Water rights in the Pawvant Valley, the Pawvant district, you don't get new water rights. In order to use a water right, you dry something up, you transfer a water right, you use it. There is no new water to be had. Are we over allocated? Yes. But is that a discussion for the county level for us? Maybe we start the conversation, but that needs to happen at the state level division of water rights. That has nothing to do with this. And then you talk about the small family farms. My dad passed in the last year, and my family made the decision to sell his farm. Because at this point, it is so difficult to farm the way we used to farm, the way my dad farmed. It doesn't pay anymore. You can't keep running an antique piece of equipment to support a family on 300 acres. Not only animal farming, but land agriculture, it's changing. We have to adapt.
Thank you. Your time is up. You had a question as well. Please ask a question and direct it to one of the two parties.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk. My name is Len Zubak. I would like to ask the Knolls, your water right that you have for your pig farm right now states that you will dry up 27 acres of irrigated cropland and remove 77 animal units off from that well. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Have you done that?
Yes.
Do you have meters on your well?
Yes.
Can I come and look at it? It's one question. I'm just asking you about your water right.
And just a quick point, please, is the question before this was asked both parties, so do I get a minute to respond?
Sure.
Great. The last question was about water quality and quantity. We're in a basin that is over-allocated and we're drying up. We all know that. Just because we have paper water doesn't mean that we have wet water. That's number one. So it's irresponsible to keep approving these other things. We're exporting our water to China. Number two, the Christensen farm, as far as water quality, originally when permitted, was supposed to have 2 monitoring wells. There's currently no monitoring wells out of that farm, so there's no way for us to get a baseline to see if there's any contamination in the water. How many seconds do I have left? And I'll just end there. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Next question. And which side is it for? And keep it in form of a question and not a string.
My question is I was reading the Millard County Chronicle progress this afternoon. It identified the people that had organized this initiative as anti-agriculture radicals. Do you have a response to this? And they said it was all coming from outside. What is your response to that?
My response is that is a bald-faced misrepresentation and a lie. This came nowhere but from Millard County and from people who want to protect Millard County. The reason family farms are being driven out is because of the vertical integration corporate factory farming that is displacing 93% of the family farms. And I find it's irresponsible that we have organizations that are lobbying for that and supporting a business model that is driving their constituents out of business. And I don't think we should be doing that in Millard County either.
Okay, we're going to move on to the candidates. I do want this is my question, and I do want to ask a short series of questions, both of you, just 2 questions. Short answers, please. Okay. Your question is regarding property rights, because this ban might create a question on property rights. I'll give you a chance to answer it. Your question is going to be on economic impact and growth for the county in general. It would be unfair to say how much contribution economically do the CAPOs provide to the county budget, but that would be an area that at least should be addressed. I will let you go first, Steve.
Okay, and give me the question one more time.
Your question is around property rights and how your proposal actually would be considered on infringing on property rights. If somebody's invested in property, they've gone You know, they're in the big business. What kind of impacts does that have on what people can do with their property going forward?
And I think that's a very important question, and we need to frame this. This is not somebody moving in on existing agricultural, such as Bill Wright has a dairy out here. And this is not a subdivision moving in and then shutting him down by claiming it's a nuisance. What this is balancing a property right between a large industrial agricultural user with millions and billions of pounds of pig feces versus our rights. And unfortunately, and you're right, is normally we balance that test through the judicial branch, which is one branch of our government, to go ahead and make that limited test. But unfortunately, the legislature has removed that limited test and skewed it in favor of basically giving all of our property rights to Big Ag. So at this point, we have no choice but to limit the size and the scale of their operations.
Well, I want to ask you a follow-up question, but I'm not going to lest I become Chris Wallace. On to your question about economic impact. I think there should be an opportunity to address that, even though you may not have exact numbers.
Of course. So one thing that I think is true about ag, including hogs, is that agriculture is one of the industries that actually creates wealth. And what I mean by that is we take resources like water and land and make something. That statement that we export our water, what we're actually exporting is hay. And I don't know how many of you have driven around Millard County, but we produce wonderful hay. We have taken ground that was not otherwise usable and created a product and an economic benefit to our county. I would also argue that, you know, I have no idea what the number is on the tax base. I don't want to throw out an incorrect number. But I heard while we were going through the public hearings that the money generated off of these hog farms could provide a teaching job in our schools for every operation we allowed to come in. And as someone who has children attending those schools, I believe that's a much needed benefit.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to turn our attention now to the candidates. Thank you for your participation. Please introduce yourself along the way. There are people other than myself in the room that may not know who you are.
Thank you very much. Do I have to turn this on maybe? Or
yeah, and hold it close to your mouth.
Hold it close. I'm Bill Wright. Many of you maybe don't know me. Actually, I reside in McCormick, and as been mentioned, we do have a dairy. We're involved in agriculture. Previous to that, I was from Utah County. I would introduce my wife, who is not here tonight. She had a knee replacement last week, so she's not coming. But we have 10 children. We have 34 grandchildren. So, you know, I've had a lot of experiences doing a lot of stuff. So, anyway, I appreciate the opportunity of those of you that would come and listen. And you might ask the question, why would you run for this position? And probably like everybody else, give the same answer. I think lots of citizens are concerned about what's happening in our country, and that's reflected in our counties. And so I guess I've always had at least some desire to, a feeling that we don't need much government if the people conduct themselves appropriately. And that's generally my philosophy. The question that I get asked the most, I get asked a lot of questions. The question I get asked the most is, why can't we have production and be able to have an opportunity in this county that my children and grandchildren can move here and be able to prosper and make a living? We have about as much land base. I think we're probably the 3rd or 4th largest county. So we have a tremendous amount of potential here. That is probably untapped. It's not because it hasn't been tried, but we're farther away from the Wasatch Front. And as they move out, we can, through wisdom and common sense, we can continue to capture that. If you'll excuse me just a minute, I'm going to read a statement because we've been talking about some of this. What we've been talking about does not apply only to CAFOs and hog operations. This applies, I think all of you sitting here will probably, can you not hear? Okay, I'll get right here. like this.
Like a rock singer.
Yeah, well, I get the bug if I do that, but okay. But all of you are sitting here probably in the next, few weeks is going to get a bill from the county for property taxes. You all own property and you want to be able to use that property. I would like to quote John Adams, which is one of our founders. The moment the idea is admitted into society that property is not as sacred as the laws of God, anarchy and tyranny commands. Property must be secured or liberty cannot exist. Now, are we going to see that happen tomorrow? No, we're not going to see it tomorrow. We're not going to see it next week. We won't probably even see it for 20 or 30 years. But I think John Adams is correct. When we start admitting these ideas, and that's what we're discussing here tonight, and those ideas apply to everything we do. If we have the ability to arbitrarily confiscate one vocation, we have the ability to arbitrarily confiscate every single vocation that we're involved in. It really don't matter what you do. Well, back to the county. There's lots of issues. I haven't been involved in the county previously. I hear people make comments. I haven't been to the meetings. But I know as we move forward in our world today, we need to use a lot of common sense. We need to go back and look at time-vested principles that have proven to be correct. There's been over 6,000 years in this country, there's been many experiments of different forms of government. I think that we would all agree that some of those experiments have not worked. Socialism, communism, a lot of the other things have not worked. I think that those principles that we want to implement are tried and tested, and we can implement them with everything we do and gain as much security and happiness as we can possibly have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Phillips.
Guess the mic is on. Can you hear me? Well, first off, I'd like to thank Progress Chronicle people, Shelley and her staff, for pulling this together tonight. My name is Ed Phillips. I'm a lifelong resident of Millard County. Had the opportunity of serving as the county sheriff for 7 terms, so a lot of you people I know. My name is probably familiar to most of you. I'd like to thank my wife, Margaret, for being here tonight, and 3 of my daughters and their families here tonight. So anyway, as I mentioned, I'm a lifelong resident of Millard County, and I'm deeply invested in Millard County. I was fortunate to raise my 4 daughters in this county, and actually all 4 of my son-in-laws are from Millard County. So let me just kind of get into why I'm running for Millard County, besides the fact that it's near and dear to my heart. I've worked with, I've counted up, I've worked with, I think, 18 different county commissioners during the time that I was a county sheriff, and the makeup of several different county commissions. Economic development is one of the main reasons that I have decided to jump into this. I've watched this for years and years. You know, we've had this power plant come in. That part of the power plant, this is probably a pretty good depiction of Millard County as far as any growth or any increase in tax revenue to fund the necessary services of the county. So again, I've watched this thing on economic development. After the power plant comes in here, and we're pretty flush as far as the tax base goes. But since then, very little has happened. About everything that's happened in this county, there's been somebody knocking on the door wanting to come in. as far as getting out and hustling and bringing in industry that has and can provide sustainable jobs, we just haven't had much activity in that regard. So I'll take the lead in promoting Millard County. Those of you who know me know that I'm not a bashful person when it comes, especially when it comes up to speaking up for the people of this county. I think much can be done to promote the existing industries and infrastructure of this county. There's a untold, I agree with, I think Bill mentioned a little bit of untapped natural resources here in this county. The talk of the inland port up in Salt Lake County. I had a friend from Mesa, Arizona send me this. It's an article, some of you maybe have seen it. It's produced by KSL. It's called Rural Counties Vying for a Part of Utah's Global Trade. I had to read this 3 times and pinch myself after reading it each time to see Millard County is nowhere listed in this report about getting a piece of the action out of the Wasatch Front and economic development. Every single county south of Utah County, from east to west, and sure to the southern end of our border, is listed in this report. Economic development is just something that is to the forefront of my mind, something that I'll dive in full all of the way. One other thing, I've got a signal, I've got less than a minute here. One of the things that I'm committed to do, well, number one, let me preface that with saying one commissioner can't dance alone. At least it takes two to get anything done. And I'm a kind of an individual that can work into a group, reach some consensus on important and serious issues, and move forward on them. One of the goals I would have moving in, if I'm given the opportunity to be a commissioner, is change some of the management structure within the commission and the oversight over the direct oversight over the responsibilities of the county commission. The management duties and so on. Well, we're not talking about the other elected officials. Looks like I'm out of time. But those areas of the responsibility of the commission, road department, landfill, there's quite a list that goes on. That just needs to be reorganized and more attention paid to it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We have some questions that were collected and were asked by me to ask of you. So I will start with them. I will alternate back and forth. I'm going to take one.
You're looking at me. I guess I'm.
Yeah. Well, we're going back and forth. So.
All right.
Just one question, Chad.
Yeah.
As a question is asked and a response is given, is there an opportunity to speak to it, or
we will accommodate this on the same basis we did the last one. We will allow for a 2-minute answer to the question, a 30-second rebuttal. I want to start with one question that would determine my vote for both of you and give you both a chance to give me a 30-second answer. Do you watch the county seat? You go first.
I do not.
Okay. And Mr. Phillips, do you watch the county seat?
I've been on the county seat, and I do watch it. I don't know, what do they call it? Devo, TiVo, whatever it is. It's on every Sunday, and so I record it and generally try to get back to it and watch it.
As I can't vote in the election, you both are safe here.
So I'm off your list.
No. You're both safe here. I am going to invite you to make that a habit. It will help you in the discharge of your duties should you become elected to the county commission. My first question for you is, have you accepted any campaign contributions for this election? If so, how much and from whom?
Well, I can't give you the total. My wife keeps track of that. There's probably several $1,000s. There's a pact, an ag pact from the state legislature. I've received some from that, I think 1,000. The rest were all individuals, neighbors. You know, I'm not going to, the list will be published, but neighbors and things like that. I haven't received any corporate or any other political. I have not received no Republican. I haven't received no organizations. They've all been private individuals except for that one act.
Thank you very much. Mr. Phillips.
Well, I've just been working on my report. I think it's due to the clerk's office in a week or two. If I'd have known he was going to ask that question, I'd have been happy to bring it here. But just,
I'm sure the intent is to find out the general areas from which your campaign contributions have come.
all of mine have come from the local area of Millard County. Other than I've got a friend in Las Vegas that sent me a contribution. One in Mesa, Arizona sent me a contribution. I have had some in-kind contribution and help from the political party that I'm affiliated with, the United Utah Party, has provided me with some in-kind services, and I think that amount is about $1,200 in assistance in printing material and so on and so forth. So again, as Mr. Wright mentioned, he's got a report he's got to send in, I got to send one in. It's all public information.
Those questions are right here on my list, so that's why I asked them. Okay, next question for Mr. Wright. It's fairly well known that you are pretty well conservative by your comments previously. How do you respond to farm subsidies as a government handout? What would be your response to that question?
I've generally had the philosophy that I think, you know, being conservative all my life, and, you know, later in life I started asking the question. So I didn't like what I seen, what was going on in the country. I mean, 20 years ago it was maybe difficult to be able to, I guess, philosophically say my opinion on what's happening. It's pretty easy today. When you turn on the TV and you see what's happening with the more mobs and the raids and the disrespect for property, then I started asking myself, what am I doing? And about 10 years ago, basically I decided that I either had to contribute or be part of the problem. Well, so I asked myself, so how are we part of the problem? I have felt that unearned help or unearned subsidies for agriculture creates a situation and feeds socialism, and we become part of the problem. And so generally I have been opposed to those subsidies. I have not, as previously in partnership with my father. He didn't always have that attitude. I think there was a couple of times we did. But I have, for the last decade, have not participated in the myriad of programs. And the reason why is I want to be a contributor. I don't want to be part of the problem. I want to contribute to our society. I think socialism is a devastating disease, and we need to get away from it. So individually, we need to not participate.
So to fine-tune this question that was put before me, I was trying to find a polite way to ask it. When was the last time Doubletree Dairy took farm subsidies of a federal nature?
That was in Doubletree Dairy. We got, when we purchased a place out there, it was in a program, and those programs carried on, and I went and took us out of that program. The next year, on the count thing, it's been 11 years.
Okay.
That we haven't participated at all.
Thank you very much. Mr. Phillips, you're a candidate of a third party. and it's a much smaller, much less known party than the two major parties. Why did you decide to run under the banner of the United Utah Party?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. For the entire time I've been involved in politics, it goes clear back to 1978 when I first filed for office as a county sheriff. And I, up to that point, had been affiliated with, other than voting in elections, had nothing to do with partisan politics. At that particular time, partisan politics in Millard County was pretty much balanced. In other words, it was a way to get on a ballot in seeking office, and that was about it. But it's morphed into a much different situation as time has moved on, as we've all seen, particularly in the last 6 or 8 years. So why did I attach myself to the United Utah Party? It's plain and simple. Over all of those years, I've seen no absolute reason at all that partisan politics had any place in local government to begin with. Well, it hasn't in cities for some time. It hasn't in the school districts, and it has, in my opinion, no place in county government. And it come time for me to make it, when I decided I was going to run, who I was going to affiliate with, I had heard about this party, and the more I researched it, seen their platform, it fit me about as good as any pair of gloves I've ever had. They promote nonpartisan in local government. I got a copy of their platform right here with me, and I'd be happy to share with somebody. We probably haven't got time to go through it here right tonight, but I'm pretty proud of it. And
yeah, you're right. You don't
that's
have
why
time.
I'm there.
You don't have time to go through it because your 2 minutes is up. Mr. Wright, you in your previous answer mentioned socialism, and that you're against it multiple times, and it shows up in your campaign literature, so I'm told. In light of this, what are your feelings towards the record-setting amount of farm subsidies that are going out right now, and the increased amount of farm subsidies that have come out as a result of the Trump administration's attempt to subsidize farmers due to the change in trade status with foreign countries?
I think they develop a lot of bad habits. When we start socialism, we find out that in a government like that, pretty soon we find it creates laziness, it creates inefficiencies, and then everybody wants what everybody else has. We don't have to look far to see the evidence we have in our country today. I collectively decided myself that I didn't want to contribute to that. And wanting to be a good citizen and those principles, I have steered away from it. I have not participated. That's the decision that I made for me personally. I have no feelings about someone who would or wouldn't. I think we all have to find out for ourselves. My participation in that years ago, at a very small level, taught me that what was happening, and I was able to see clear that's how my opinion was developed. I participated in it, and I found out the way I felt about it, my attitude, and me and my wife felt that we didn't need that. We didn't need to take your resources for me. It was for me to get out of bed and go do it myself. I'm sure all of you here never felt compelled to contribute to my dairy. And with those programs, guess what? You're all contributing. And I'll thank you for everybody else, I guess.
How good is your heavy whipping cream?
It is excellent. You'd love our milk.
And I might be interested in contributing.
And butter. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Mr. Phillips, question for you. This will be the last of the specific candidate questions, and then there'll be general questions following this. You signed on as a co-sponsor for Proposition 6, the first part of this debate covered that. Can you explain why you support prohibiting industrial hog farming in Millard County?
I don't particularly support the overall concept of the Proposition 6. I did support it. Let me just preface that by saying I am not a fan of government by referendum, but I also am a believer in that there are certain issues that rise to the level of the public having the right, they do have the right, and taking that right to weigh in on it. And my pure intent in signing on as a co-sponsor, whatever it took to get the commission to take whatever action they took to allow this referendum drive to continue on. My rationale behind that is, I think it is an issue that rises to the level of the public having the opportunity to weigh in on it.
Okay, thank you.
And as to the socialism issue, I don't know why we're even, you know, I come here tonight prepared to talk about county issues, and it.
These were just, they're on my piece of paper. Okay. We're going to get into county issues. Immediately following this, we are going to get into county issues. So I'm going to redirect my attention to Mr. Wright. Several counties across the country have determined that it's more efficient for them and more in line with the free enterprise system to contract county services. There are some counties across the nation that have contracted out their jails to private enterprise. There are some municipalities here in the state of Utah that contract their road maintenance work outside of the county. What is your feeling, and I'll let both of you answer, what is your feeling about contracting to private enterprise some of these services that counties provide?
Well, when you look at these issues, it's the nature of government and individual government to build little kingdoms. And so there's sometimes a reluctance to do that. Everything should be evaluated. We need to have services that have value. As we look at all the services and what we're doing, we need to be able to better measure what we're really doing for the citizens. There's some that have great value and some that don't have. The economics of the thing, we probably is, I agree with that. Economic development is a very important issue. But we talk what would contribute to that economic development not perpetuating itself would be some of these issues we've been talking about. Property rights, other things. I mean, we already know that the whole state is looking at us down here saying, so you really want development? And by doing what we got as this proposition, that's not going to encourage development at all. I don't care whether you're a hog farm or what. But yes, each of those individuals should be looked at individually. When we don't have the potential or enough economy of scale to do it ourselves, we should be contracting it out. But that's by an individual basis. I can't tell you what we should or shouldn't be doing.
Mr. Phillips.
Well, I guess all I can respond to in regards to that question would be our situation here in Millard County. And it would make absolutely, you mentioned the jail, it would make absolutely no sense at all in Millard County. In fact, one of the things that Millard County and other counties have picked up on over the years, I was the first sheriff. We had no jail. I got a new jail built here, found out it could be double bunked, and found out the state prison needed some beds for just some isolated protective custody is what they called them at that particular time. We're the first county to start contracting, as far as jails go, contracting with the state, bringing a stream of revenue into this county. Today is on the average since the mid-1980s of about $1 million a year. So other services in this county, you know, that would even lend itself to a private contractor would be the garbage situation, the landfill. And I'm sure if the numbers were run and a company was to come in and want to take that over, I think the county commissioners for a number of years would like to unload that. But, you know, the numbers just haven't worked. Ambulance service is another one that, you know, thank heavens we have what we have and been able to improve on it over the years. I've been a major part of that, asked by the county commissioner back in the late 80s, early 90s, if I would take that responsibility over from the commission and manage it and operate it throughout the sheriff's office. Certainly, if Gold Cross could come in here and make a profit and provide the level of service that we have right now, that would make sense. But beyond it, those two items, I can't think of anything else that Millard County could possibly contract out to private enterprise.
Okay. Next question that I'd like to ask for both of you. Obviously, the dark cloud that hangs over Millard County deals with IPP and the eventual shutdown of it. There are areas of economic development, you both have referred to that tonight. One of the other areas that, of course, is of interest to me and what I've done through the years is recreational opportunities here in Millard County. How would each of you seek to improve recreational opportunities in Millard County? And to go with that, how would you increase tourism to the area, or would you? Mr. Wright.
Well, in my past experience in serving in the state legislature, not that really anybody's to blame with this situation. Up till this point in time, the county has not had the financial stress because of the revenues. So the county has not really opened its door. I've talked to many companies in the last several years, and they find out where you're from, and they have felt, as they asked the county and brought certain proposals, that there has not been an open door. Generally, they've somewhat stepped back, with energy and other things, and says, well, we have not had an open door to go down there, and that's because I think there was an attitude, well, we really didn't want them or really didn't need them. And that might have served us well up till now, but we need to really let this cancel. In working with state trust lands and others, and my relationship with them over the years and having been in the legislature, they basically say this county has more potential for improvement with minerals and minings and gas and a variety of other things that are coming than really any county in the state of Utah. Now, will that be developed? I think it's going to have to be because of an attitude and environment that people want to come here, people want to live here, that it's welcoming, and that we can bring those opportunities to people previous to now. They felt a little bit of reluctance to be very inviting to them.
Okay, the question was based around tourism and improving tourism as an economic driver for the county. So if you want to take just a couple of seconds more to address that, and then we'll...
Well, the state's very willing to do that. The county, in relationship to what they haven't done, I don't know. I think the county's been fairly welcoming to the tourism now. Obviously through marketing and advertising. I don't know how much marketing we're actually doing, but there's a lot of people looking for activities and other things, and I think just be able to trap those resources and be able to get an identity out there of really who we are.
Okay, Mr. Phillips, I'd like you
your first question, dealing with recreation and so on, what would we do to improve?
Well, recreational opportunities.
Well, recreational opportunities are in pretty good shape in this county right now, and hopefully we're going to be able to keep them and maintain them at least the level it is right now. Recreational opportunities have become, in my lifetime, much more important. Not only, I think, just for the overall health of the community, not to mention about the fact you're talking about tourism and these other kinds of things. The things that you have here locally that will draw people in. There's been, I think, a pretty good effort put forth by Millard County government over the years in cooperation with the cities, city governments, the chambers of commerce, and so on, and advertising and being very welcoming to tourism. Much more could probably be done and should be done. I think the ATV trails, those kinds of things are continuing to improve. The one thing this COVID crisis that's hit us all upside the head this year has done, that I've seen and been able to witness, ATV dealers are out of machines, RV dealers are out of travel trailers and so on. People have been hitting the road to keep their sanity and so on, and I think a lot of Millard County has been discovered through that, and I think we'll bear fruit from that continuing on. So again, Bill started off with his statement, and I'm in total agreement on it. If you haven't got good recreational opportunities and good recreational infrastructure here, and you're out beating the bushes trying to get economic development into this area and into the county, that's, especially with big companies, that's one of the first things they look at. So
I see that the fist is closed, which means your time is up on that.
Whatever.
Okay, thank you so much. Next question, and I think this is important with everybody in this room, and it's to both of you. We'll start again with Mr. Wright, so we'll go back and forth. Do you see any reason to raise taxes in Millard County? And if you did, under what conditions would you consider it?
Well, I haven't been in those meetings. Everybody says that there will have to because of the reduction in revenues. I would suggest we look at other opportunities. We do other things that maybe we're not getting value out of. I don't know what they are. But to continue to work, like Ed says, and get economic development, tourism, or particularly more growth and companies, the inland port could mean a tremendous thing for this area and would bring a tremendous revenue and economic growth into this county, and it fits in a lot of things. There's lots of things coming down the pipeline. Our hope would be that we don't have to do that. We're going to have to balance our budget. It just depends on what kind of appetite we have for spending. If we can maybe curb our appetite for spending and what we provide, then maybe we'd be in a position we wouldn't have to. Like I say, not being there, the revenues will be significantly decreasing in the future, and we need to replace that, which will probably be difficult with new businesses, more economic growth than we've had in the last few years.
Mr. Phillips.
Well, this question is there's really nothing new to it. We've been in a situation since the power plant cranks up and the tax base. At one time, I could be off a little bit on this. That power plant was about 80% of the tax base of this county, maybe even higher than that. I don't know. But from day one, the food fight's been on with the state tax commission, who sets the valuation on state assessed kinds of property. Power plant being one, railroad being another one. There's several of those types of property in this county that county commissioners really don't have much of a say over, or the county assessor say over the valuation. So the valuation of that power plant's been sinking for years. Our tax base has been sinking for years. And that's part of what's fired me up on this. We got to get our rear in gear on this economic development thing and start taking life super serious in that regard. Or yeah, you're going to have to start trimming things that the tax base supports, or stabilize it. And I'd like to reverse things, get it back up to where it was 20 to 25 years ago. So it's a serious question, and it is a matter of just simply balancing the books as to what your tax base is. Our tax rate has been increased over the years, very incrementally, simply because of the devaluation of that power plant. But again, as I started in my earlier statement, we haven't been on the hustle. You know, we've been asleep at the switch in this county as far as really getting out and putting forth a full effort. And I'm a guy that's prepared to do it. I'm retired. I've got the time, still got the energy. That I'll go get it done. So,
thank you very much. On that very note, this ties in very, very well to the next question that I'd like to pose. Tomorrow, when you reconvene to reproduce this debate in Fillmore, there will be no county commissioners available because they will be meeting people who are here on an economic development hunt. So they're not available. We were looking for an interview on the county seat. In my observation over the last decade of working on the county seat program, I have come to the conclusion that a county commissioner is the only part-time job that requires about 70 to 75 hours a week. Are both of you prepared to make those commitments, to sit on those committees, to make the travel out of the county, to show up for the different requirements that help propel county health along? Mr. Wright.
I am not a retired person. I still have an active business, several other associations. I want to keep it that way. There's been many county commissioners in the past. Maybe people felt they did a good job. Maybe people felt they didn't. That has been in the same position that I have. I am prepared to give the time I need to get the job done.
Mr. Phillips.
Well, with a real straight face, I can tell you when I was the sheriff, I never worked an 8-hour day in all of those years. I like to work. That's just what, I don't know, keeps me alive and moving. And I am committed to put in whatever time is necessary to right the ship, so to speak, in the economic development world. I'm glad to hear somebody's in here occupying the commissioner's time, maybe talking about some of these things. There's some tremendous potential, and it just needs to be exploited. I'll tell you one of the things that when you start talking about this county and the potential that's in this county, not just from new businesses coming in and so on, but the something I haven't heard this terminology for a long time. It just popped into my mind the other day. The WSA. You ever remember that acronym, WSA? Wilderness Study Areas. We still have all kinds of proven minerals west of Delta. Old mine sites are scattered all over out there. And all of this has been tied up all of these years with wilderness study. And what has been done in the last several decades, most recently or whatever, by county commissioner, state legislators, congressmen or whatever. The word has just gone away. It just as well be designated as wilderness area, not a wilderness study area. Somebody needs to get up on their hind legs and go somewhere and start knocking down doors. And I mean, it's just crazy to be in this kind of a situation and be hamstrung like we've been, locking up that kind of potential, revenue potential for this county.
Okay. How are we on this time?
We probably need to do a few audience questions and then we're pretty much done.
Okay. So, you've kind of gotten a handle of an idea about the two candidates, and so now, being COVID appropriate, if any of you have any questions for the candidates running for county commission, raise your hand, let's get them asked. Okay?
Remember, they're questions, not editorials.
For both of you, you've been talking about taxes and stuff like that. What do you think about how are you going to handle a situation like the building over in Fillmore when somebody overbills it and then it goes from $400, now if the news article was correct, from $400,000 to $800,000 and currently nobody has any say about it. What are you going to do about it?
Somehow I anticipated that question would come up here tonight. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons that, as far as I'm concerned, that it come into the forefront was a lot to do with me. And it wasn't just that the building that has been started there is there. It's what got me a little excited in the beginning of it was what was torn down in order to prepare the site for the partially constructed building that's there right now. And that was tearing down still usable, still being used, horse stables, and in fact a barn, a Quonset barn that had stables in it too. Never even went to Fillmore City for a demolition permit. It was here today, gone tomorrow, and all of a sudden county road trucks hauling in fill material to build this site for this building. Let's just back up a little bit from what I know about it. Now, I haven't been to all budget hearings, county commission hearings, and anything else. But once I started getting a little bit involved in this demolition that took place, and I'm finding out more and more about this building. Well, a year ago, as the county was preparing their budgets, they operate on a January year, so this is the time of year county budgets are being put together for next year, 2021. A year ago, the county road department, as I take it to being the supervisor, comes to the county commission wanting to build a 4-bay metal building in Fillmore, specifically to house snowplow trucks in the winter to shelter and so, which makes sense. You know, the original proposal for $400 and some thousand makes sense. But that isn't what happened. You know, it somehow gets lost. This metal 4-bay, $400 and some thousand building to what is standing over there now, partially finished, which is just a huge, huge building. Makes no sense at all. I've listened to a county commissioner try and convince me of the need of doing this. The same with the county road supervisor trying to convince me. And the first part of my working life spent in the construction industry. You know, I've got a background in that.
Your time is up.
My time is up, but I'll tell you this. It needs, and penalize me all you want, this building needs to be stabilized at this point. It needs the trusses put on it. It needs a roof put on it to stabilize the investment that's there. And then I suppose we'll see what happens from that point on. But it's a mistake that should never have been made.
Mr. Wright.
Well, we can use all the excuse we want, but it's evident that we haven't had the proper checks and balances that should have been in place continually. And as we move into the future, we need to change stuff. That could be a problem with our budget already. We don't have the proper checks and balances. I asked someone who actually works for the county, I says, well, who's watching over that? Do we have a chief financial officer? Where do you go who's handling money that they don't have someone watching those budgets? I don't know. Even in our house we have one, it's my wife. And she watches that budget. Well, I asked the question, who's watching over this? Well, the auditor checks it. Go home, look up the job description for a chief financial officer, look up a job description for an auditor. It's like the fox watching the hen house. They have two totally different responsibilities. So apparently, we need to, this is evidence, we need to put in place someone to approve and watch over those budgets, watch that spending. Now the auditor has a responsibility. The auditor sees that it was spent correctly and sees that what you said is going to be done is done. You have to have a financial officer to preview that, work with the county commissioners, work with the departments, so everybody's on the same rate. That basically shouldn't happen. But what Ed says now, yeah, you need to finish it. But you need to learn from it, and you need to go back and change the process to get to that point.
Okay, next question. Yes, sir.
I'll watch your show. I've been on. Thanks. Mr. Phillips, my question is to you. I'm sad to hear that you're for Prop 6.
Did I say I was for Prop 6?
Well, when he mentioned that you were a co-sponsor of Prop 6.
I am in favor of the people having a chance to weigh in on it.
Okay, so that's my question.
Okay.
If this group and it passes, Prop 6 passes, it's not against if you're for pigs or you're against pigs. It's a personal property rights. If this passes and you're a commissioner, and the question is a straight answer, yes or no. You're okay with them telling you you can't do anything about it. It's just straight up. It's taking all the power away from you from being our commissioner to say, bring this to the process. You're okay with that as our commissioner?
I'm okay with following whatever occurs out of this Prop 6 election. I'm not even convinced, and this opens up another can of worms about the autonomy of Millard County, and that's a big concern for me. I'm not convinced to this day, if Proposition 6 passes, that the state legislature, who is forever and ever sticking their nose into local government, trying to micromanage local government, that they won't pull off something just to override the will of the people, if that even becomes the will of the people. Prop 6 goes down with the no vote. I am totally prepared to work with whatever the process is to address the pig farm situation.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Wright.
Okay, think about this proposition. I know it's emotional. I know for many of you it creates a real inconvenience. But think about how big our county is. Think about, most of you know anybody in Estelle. Think about if this proposition passes, this passes for the whole county. I don't know how you feel, but do you want to tell someone in Estelle, which is 75 miles away, for them and their family, that they can't provide, that they can't have an opportunity and have a business? Maybe you feel comfortable with it. I don't feel comfortable doing that. We talk about checks and balances in government. We have a federal government and a state government that was set up with checks and balances. This proposition eliminates all the checks and balances. What do we have in any of our laws? We don't have a checks and balance. This proposition eliminates any of that. Then the worst thing Ed has already said, what you do is give your hand to the state, because that's what's going to happen. You're going to invite them in. The reason the state was, and we won't go on that, we don't have enough time, but the state came in last year and tried to correct it. The reason that happened is because of that Proposition 6. If you want to leave the state out, if you want to govern yourself, then stand up and govern yourself in an appropriate way. And when you do something that shows that there's not appropriate governance, then they're going to be in here, and we don't want them in here. We can solve this problem here. We don't need the state to help us.
Thank you very much. More questions? That's it? We got three. You have a chance to speak. I'll come back to you. We'll start back here. And then go over there and come back.
It's been mentioned from both of you the concerns of the duties of the commissioners. I feel like we've had good commissioners. I do feel like they're overworked. My question is this to both of you. Would you be interested at all in restructuring the commission so that we have more representatives, people that aren't necessarily having to be full-time commissioners who could also have jobs, and possibly look at a county administrator like we had when we did get the power plant in this area, so that there is someone accountable as opposing to have to divvy up the responsibilities between 3 people.
Want me to go for it? I'm not opposed to looking at that farm. There's several counties that are a lot bigger than ours. Most counties our size does not have that. Cache County has what they call a county mayor administrator. I think somebody can tell. Utah County's voting on that this time. Obviously, because of circumstances, that might be an advantage. Like I say, I'm not opposed to looking at those other farms, because you are correct. You have a county minister that's full-time, and then basically our county mayor. Salike has it. They have the same form up there. And you have more representatives. You have more individuals from the county, from areas, probably 5 or 6 is broken up, that serves like a legislative body, like a House of Representatives or something, less time. It might work, it might not. We'd have to wait and see what we're faced with, and if those situations might help us get a little better representation.
Mr. Phillips.
Well, again, time restraints, when I was first introducing myself and talking, that's one of the big things that's been on my mind is, and again, it takes more than one commissioner to do this, but my desire would be, if elected and put in that position, would be to reorganize the duties, the oversight duties, and so on of the county commission. Time restraints here tonight are just a little bit too tight to really get in and discuss some of this. Back to the building situation over there, county commissioners have oversight responsibilities. It isn't a chief financial officer that dropped the ball over here. The chief financial officer of the county is the county auditor. If you'd have been to some of the meetings, she's somebody that has stood up to this whole boondoggle to begin with. It's the responsibility of the county commissioners. This whole situation, in my view, could have been prevented if they had an intermediary, I don't know what you want to call it, a county manager, a public works director, or whatever you want to call it, that would have been on the top of this situation from the get-go. You've got county managers that are basically the responsibility of county commissioners that are going directly to the auditor's office and arguing budget kinds of issues. That's not her job. That's not her job. That's the county commission's job. This county does need some restructuring to that level, to where there's one hell of a lot more oversight over all of the areas of responsibility of county commission. The history of this county has been, I've been involved in it, observed it, and watched it. Most of the time, you're looking at runaway budgets or things that are getting balled up. Hasn't to do with the other elected offices. It's had to do with good oversight and so on of the county commission.
Thank you very much.
I could give you a whole lot of history on this if you want to take the time to do it, but it is something that really needs to be looked at.
Sounds like you two need to have a conversation after. Where was that other question back there? Him, then you, and yeah, I'll move my way forward.
Just a quick question. Who all received a pamphlet in the mail today? So everyone knows, that's me. I'm a resident of Millard County. That's a picture of me next to a mutilated pig. I don't know any pigs. I own a pig farm. I have friends against my family from extremists. And people who want to do me harm because they think I'm mutilating a pig. It's not what we're about. It's not who we are as a community. When they denied my proposal, I talked to Adam after they had my proposal. I said, anything that I can do to bring this community together, I want to bring it together. He'll tell you I said that. Anything I need to say. My question is, this individual, Jeremy Beckham, is the director of Utah Animal Rights Coalition. That is the people who put this postcard out to every person in Millard County. Ed, you've commented on his posts. You've liked his posts. You're a co-sponsor of a bill of someone whose foot spilled. It makes my wife not want to go out into the community. I would just ask, how would you respond to liking those posts, promoting films like this on It's Our Future's website?
We need to allow time to answer. I know this is an emotionally charged answer. Please make your responses very matter of fact.
My response will be very matter of fact, very brief. I have no idea what he's talking about, and I would like the opportunity to meet with that gentleman when we're through here tonight and discuss this. Again, likes and dislikes on Facebook. This is getting a little nuts here. I want to talk with that gentleman when we're through here tonight. I have no idea what he's talking about.
Mr. Wright?
Yes, back to John Adams. When we admit into society, when we allow this to happen, I think we have a lot of evidence what happens to people and how much we hurt. This is what happens when we open the door. This person from this group is not local. When we admit to society, we start teaching our children these concepts. And you might not see the downside of it right now, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not for 10 years, but this is a good example of what happens when you get involved in these issues and you start admitting things in our society that shouldn't be there, and we remove ourselves from what we ought to be thinking about doing as citizens.
Okay. I know we have at least 2 more questions. I don't know how our time is, but let's at least allow the 2 people that stood up to do this. So, sir, your opportunity. Remember, we're asking questions.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Wright, appreciate the opportunity to ask you a question. The beautiful mural there in the corners of Clear Lake. You talked about tourism and the importance of that to our community. At this time, Clear Lake is 90% dry. That's from groundwater. Clear Lake is fed by aquifers. That's the only source of water it has. My question to you is, there is no regulation on pumping in that community that is proposing to build hog farms. There's no regulations. There's no metering of any wells. It is open season. Would you, as commissioners, be willing to support the type of effort it's going to take to regulate underground water rights in our county? Thank you.
Mr. Wright, why don't you take first shot at that?
I would not say there isn't no regulations, because all that water's been appropriated. Has it been over appropriated? Yes. The state has realized that for years and years. We can give our good voice one way or another, but we can do something about property rights in this county. We have no rights. The state governs all the water in this county belongs to God and the state. And so, yes, I think it would be prudent of us to make sure that our development and that someone isn't really overusing or doing something, but we have very little to say, because the state will tell you by state statute that they own the water, and they're going to do with that water, and they're regulating it, but they're probably not, I guess you're inferring they're probably not checking it. They have the authority to do that. We don't have the authority of a county or commissioners to do that. The state is the one that has the authority to appropriate and basically measure that water and do what they're doing with it.
Mr. Phillips.
I don't disagree with anything Mr. Wright said. It isn't something that is would fall in the duties or responsibilities of the county commission. But you know, whether a county commission would support those kinds of effort, I don't know where we're headed with this. You know, in my lifetime, you know, I've seen Clear Lake from the time it overflowed water. In fact, that water used to support a community, the community of Clear Lake, irrigating croplands down there. The overall aquifer in this county is, I think, from one end of the county to the other. It's set up in zones, I do know that, and it is way over appropriated. And it's just been the last few years that the state has actually recognized that fact. It used to be just willy-nilly, anybody could go make an application and go drill a well, culinary well, for a house and a dozen chickens, 2 cows, and whatever was always stated in these applications. That's no longer the case, at least in the area of the county where I live. If you're going to drill a well or want to use any water out of the aquifer, you got to go. You're just going to go find somebody that wants to sell you whatever right of water that your need is to get it. So I think ultimately that we are headed for metering on what's coming out of the ground. You know, I don't know that I'm an advocate for it, but clearly we just can't continue with the continually pumping when the aquifer is not recharging. Again, it's into another issue with this Prop 6. My biggest concern with that whole thing from the get-go, and I haven't really heard much talk about it here tonight, and that has to do, well, there was quite a bit of talk about it, but my concern is not the water consumption, but what happens to the discharge from these farms, possibility of contaminating the aquifer that we have. So.
Okay, thank you. With 2 more people, and I have time for one more question. I told you that you'd have a response. Are you trying to send that to someone else? Or?
Yeah, if there's only one other person asking, let them ask. I can ask a question tomorrow.
Okay, well.
Right here.
Okay. Did you ask a question? I think it's actually you. Did you raise your hand for a question? Okay. Last question goes to you, Eve.
Last the best. Okay. So I just was listening to your responses on this question. So like you say, the state does regulate the water, but I don't think that they're moving their bodies out of Salt Lake City to even be checking on this. So there is metering that goes on, but when their time is up, I've seen traveling back and forth to Fillmore for 13 years, I've seen diesel pumps put on those wells. So what these farmers are doing is using the amount of water that they're allocated, but then they're putting diesel pumps on them to use what they want. And I wondered, my question is there any way that as a county that we can enforce this, you know, how do I say it? Is there any way that we can do to have the state do a better job? Because our aquifer is, you know, we don't have a lot of water left. And so I wondered if there was a way that we could make or enforce or force the state to do something about this.
You want me to give you an answer and then an explanation? You're probably not going to like the answer, but
go ahead and start.
No, we don't have authority, and water's appropriated by so many second foot an acre. Pacific Corp or Flowell Electric does not monitor that. Every well that pumps is not consistent with the amount of power and how much water you get at. So there's no way they can monitor it. If they're putting diesel pumps on there, it's not because they're trying to get around the water they can pump. It's because they decided diesel was more efficient, or whether maybe they couldn't get power there. So that really has no relationship with what they can pump, or what to find out what they're pumping. They actually have to have a monitor on the well and the water. I mean, they can keep track of your hours, but your power bill on every single well you have is different, and it's not always consistent with how much you're pumping. So if I'm misunderstanding you, then it's something that I don't understand. I don't think because they changed the pump that, to my knowledge, that don't allow them to pump more water or pump free water.
When we're talking about metering, simply metering the water, not the energy that's being used to pump the water. You know, there has been some instances, I'm aware of one, of a large farming operation over near where I live. I don't know why or what motivated the state to come down and take the action they did. This has been about 6 or 8 years, maybe a little longer than that. But somebody from the state started watching what was being pumped and what was being irrigated, and they eventually this one operation just had to mothball, abandon one pivot that they were using simply because they were pumping more water, watering more acreage than what their water right was. So Mr. Wright is 100% on track that it is a state responsibility totally. We're here locally basically powerless, other than, I guess, who we elect as state representatives. You know, how it'd be a long process to change how our water is managed throughout the state. State owns the water. Individuals may own rights, certain rights to that water. So it's kind of a complicated affair.
Okay, now the powers that be, that we can take this one last question. We promised that it was going to be a very short question. It is going to be a question, right?
So with the discussion on personal property rights, what is your familiarity with and opinion of zoning?
Mr. Phillips, we'll let you start.
Okay, well, my personal experience on it is pretty short. I actually sit on a planning and zoning commission in the small community that I live in. As it relates to property rights, here's my understanding and view on property rights is a property owner should have the right to utilize their property in about any fashion that they so desire, as long as it's not infringing on somebody else's property right. So a lot of battles get fought over this. I listened to some case law being brought up and discussed here tonight. So, yeah, everybody that owns property should have the right to fully utilize that property, the benefits of the property, and so on, up to the point to where it actually starts imposing or directly interfering with somebody else's property right. It's just a difficult situation for planning and zoning groups to delve into this and come up with the right answers all the time. So I don't know how else to respond to it other than one person's rights don't necessarily trump another person's right. No pun intended.
Mr. Wright, final word.
let me give you an analogy. I don't know if it says anything. You know, I believe in the right to bear arms, the Second Amendment. I think that we should have that freedom. With the right to bear arms, I don't have the right to murder somebody. Same way with property rights. I believe in the right that we should have property. We should be able to use that property for our benefit. In other words, for the benefit, that's the purpose we're here, which bring happiness and joy. I need to use it to benefit. I have 10 children, 34 grandchildren. I don't want to use that property to benefit a government. You know, I go to work every day and work all day because I can take care of my children, so you don't have to. That's why I get up and go to work. When you take that right away from me, where do I go? You know, good luck, I'm going to be in your pocket. I don't think you want me in your pocket. However, hence, because we have that void in between, we have planning and zoning committees. And maybe ours hasn't functioned well enough, I don't know. But those planning and zoning committees are to give each of you citizens a voice so that they can hear both sides, to be equal, and the things and laws are arbitrating, that they might all have a voice, and to try to do something that's in the best interest of everybody involved. Now, they might not all be happy, but if you get good, just men and women, they will make decisions without no prejudice that will be able to make those things happen. One thing real quickly. I get to travel. I was hauling some cattle last week. I went to Michigan and back 4,000 miles one day. As I went through Michigan and through Indiana, through Illinois, through Iowa, through Minnesota, along I-80, there is hog farms all the way, not 150 yards away from the freeway. Can you imagine that? One of these devastating operations that we see. We've seen this thing up 150 miles away from an interstate freeway. Apparently, there's a way to get along and everybody communicate and everybody live with them. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking your time this evening. Thank you for coming out to participate. This is very important. We get out of government what we put into it, and my observation has been that communities that get engaged, get involved, do their research, vet their candidates, make their voices and wills known to their local leaders, they prosper. I see former commissioners here, I see current commissioners here tonight. In my experience with them, they all work very hard and they put in countless hours. It is a thankless job. Benjamin Franklin, who never was elected to an office, once made a statement, and I might be paraphrasing a little bit, so don't hold me to the quote exactly. But it said that politics is one of the most dangerous professions that any man can choose. There is not another where he can so easily be tempted, in which veracity is so difficult, and which he might so easily lose his soul. But despite all the temptations and degradations that befall it, it is still one of the noblest things that a fellow man can do for his fellow citizens. So, vet your candidates. Try to appreciate and understand how much work they put in, and vet your issues, but above all else, at a time when it's never been more important, I encourage you to exercise your franchise in your county, in this great state, and get out there and vote. Thank you to your local paper for putting this together and exercising their constitutional duty to make sure that a free press is at work and at work properly. And thank you for inviting me out here. If you have any opinions about county commission form of government, I've got an opinion. You can talk to me later. I encourage you to talk to these gentlemen on their own. I'm going to turn this back over to you.
Let's give Sam a big hand. You did a great job. Let's give a big hand to the candidates team.